to today's session. Let me get that out of the way. Yes, welcome everybody. My name is Birgit Koopsen. I'm a brand ambassador for Gelli Arts, and I am in the Netherlands. And if you are following me on Instagram or Gelli Arts or both of us, you know that I make these videos every month called Trash or Treasure, in which I show something that I would normally toss in the bin and I decide to print with it. And then the question, of course, is this trash or treasure? And today I'm actually going to show you a variety of things that people normally would throw away, but that are great tools for gel printing. So let's turn the camera to my hands and I will show you all the treasures you can find in your house that you would normally consider trash. So here I have a bunch of prints. These were all made with items that I would normally toss out. And as you can see, there's a large variety of textures and shapes and patterns that I created. So I'm going to show you all the items that I'm using for prints like this. And of course, I'm also going to print with them so you get an idea of how you can use them. So let's start with cardboard packaging material. So here I have a whole bunch of cardboard pieces. This is all from packaging material. So usually if you have like a cardboard box and you cut out a piece of the box, then you have two layers with something in between. And if you take off one of the layers, then you get these stripes inside, like corrugated cardboard. And what I really like is when you don't take away all of that layer, but some of the paper stays on, so you get these like distressed little bits on your corrugated cardboard, which will give lovely details and extra interest to your prints. So you could actually buy sheets of corrugated cardboard, but they obviously are very clean because they don't have these little bits. So I prefer to just cut up an old box and use that. And then, of course, you have different sizes, larger boxes with larger stripes and smaller boxes with smaller stripes. Then also the same goes for what I have here. So this is basically from an IKEA box where some furniture was in, and it is the same as with this cardboard. It also has two layers of paper, and this is what is in between. It almost looks like honeycomb. And so if you tear off one side, then you get this lovely texture. And again, so here I took it off completely, and you can see like it's a small, pretty clean texture. But again, you can also leave some of the paper on, not tear it off completely, and then you get these lovely bits of which will give a distressed look in your prints. The same for this. I think this was also in a box with furniture. It was like at the sides to make sure that the pieces inside were not touching the side of the box. And it has this pattern. And it's not that I took off some paper somewhere. This is just how it came in the box, which is pretty cool, I think. And then this is something that I just recently got in a package that I ordered. And there was a bunch of this stuff at the top protecting what I ordered. So you can do fun prints with this. And then next I could go to egg cartons because we're in cardboard. So let's consider this cardboard too. So if you have a good look at your egg cartons, you will notice that there are different ones available, different shapes, different patterns. So have a good look at your egg cartons the next time when you buy some eggs. Maybe you decide to take another take something else than you take normally because it has a different bottom. So you can make really nice prints with these egg cartons. And as you can see, I've been using them quite a lot. Then of course we have the cookie trays or chocolate trays. They usually also have quite fun textures at the bottom, and even the thinnest lines will be picked up by the gel plate. So even very thin textures will show in your print. So these are fun too to use. And this also has a really fun texture that you can use in a gel print. Of course, we have bubble wrap. I think most of you, if you have done any gel printing, probably most of you have used bubble wrap. Also comes in different sizes, and also with the little bubbles in a different order, like next to each other instead of one by one. So you can also have a look at your bubble wrap if there's anything there that's a bit different. Then these are, I don't know if you have them everywhere, but these are bread bag clips. So when I buy my bread at the bakery, then these clips are used to close the bags. And if you just glue them on a piece of cardboard, you create a fun texture plate that you can use over and over again. Then we have one of my favorites is blister packs, like from medication, but also like a chewing gum, candy. Some types of candy are in blister packs. They create really fun patterns and textures, also because the bottom of the blister packs usually have some kind of texture. I don't know if you can see it, but you will also see the texture that's in between the circles. So you can imagine that if you print with this, you take away paint and you are left with little circles on your plate, and here with little more oval shapes. So I collect all the blister packs that I can. I don't know if you call them blister packs, but that's how we call them. So, but you know what I mean, right? So I have drawers full of these because my entire family knows now that I collect them and I get all the different ones. So I can use them for years. Then also from the grocery store, these nets, like onion nets or oranges, are sometimes also in these nets. And this is a little bit sturdier. This is where the carrots for my horses come in. Like, they are really big nets with like 10 kilos of carrots. So this is a totally different pattern than this one. So even if you look at your onion nets and orange nets where oranges are in, or apples, I don't know if you have them in nets, you can even look at those, that there are different ones that will create different patterns in your prints. And now I have little bits of the net on my plate that might show up, but that's okay. Then I have here some old shoelaces that are like totally worthless for in your shoes. And I have to admit, I was about to toss them out, and I thought, no, this might actually create a really nice texture on the plate. So I'm definitely going to try that. So my shoelaces. Then I have some old what are they called? Sewing thread spools. Are they called spools? Yeah, I see somebody saying yes. So these are also really fun to create textures with on the plate. Then, of course, everything that is a lid for different bottles and yeah, so I just collect all the different ones because they all have different sizes. Some have like a thicker bottom so that you can use the ring instead of the full circle. This one has a deeper area here. So this will create more like an outline more than a complete circle. This one even has some parts cut out of it. So it will create almost like a wheel or something. And then, of course, corks. You can use both sides, the cork and the thing at the top. And then also the little can. Is it a can? I don't know. Where I keep them in the bottom of this, I can also use to print with because that, again, has a different round shape. So you can create patterns where you have circles inside of bigger circles and do some fun stuff with it. What else do I have? I have some really old coasters. I think these were also from IKEA, but they are like, I don't know, rubber or something. So they will last forever. And I have them for years, but they are still fun to create patterns with in my gel printing. Then I have some old, I don't know if you are a card maker or a scrapbooker, maybe, then you might have some of these leftover chipboard letters. And well, the letters were used, but the negative or the piece where the letters were in is still here. And this also makes a really nice pattern on your gel plate. And I think I'm kind of, oh, how about some old buttons? So here I've just glued, I used hot glue to glue the buttons to a piece of cardboard to create a texture plate. So if you have old clothes that you can't give away because they are really not good enough anymore, then you can take off the buttons and you can create a texture plate with them. And so I also came across this today. So I haven't really used it yet. So this I think is from my old fridge, and it is meant to put eggs in. So I was like, let's see, let's just try and see what I can do with that. So I'm definitely going to use that today. And also, of course, just old plastic bags that can't be used or won't be used again can create really nice texture on the plate. And so on and so on. I also have some thread and yarn here that's not being used anymore. I have even just, I think it's called a wad of paper, a wad just crushed like this, and it will create a beautiful organic pattern. And then last but not least, I have some fabric pieces here, like this is from an old jeans. I just cut out the parts that were interesting and will create a fun print. These, I have tons and tons of these. My grandma used to have them on like every table and every desk, and then there would be a little vase with flowers on it or an ashtray or I don't know, whatever whatever she put on the table had this underneath. So I have lots of them. I thought I could use one or two for my gel printing. Gives a really beautiful print. Or some pieces of lace, like from maybe old curtains or something, and a piece of I really don't remember the word of this anymore. It's called jute in Dutch, but it's probably not even close to what you call it, but also gives a nice print and another piece of lace. So let's do some printing. I think I will just create a couple of prints with 3 or 4 different patterns on one print. Burlap. I see the the chat popping up. Burlap. That's what I meant. This. So that's a very different word than our word. I'm just going to create 3 or maybe 4 different patterns in one print, and then I'm just going to try to make as many prints and use as many items as possible to show you what they look like. So today I'm going to print on, let me see where the paper is. Here's the paper. So I'm going to print on Recollections card from Michaels, which is quite a sturdy card. It's thicker than copier paper, maybe as thick as the heaviest copier paper, and it's really smooth. I like it. I like it when the paper is really smooth. Then also you have less chance that your paper sticks to the plate. So if you have paper that has a lot of fibers, which is more like a soft paper, then the paint might be absorbed by the paper and the paper stays a bit wet. And then when you're too quick with pulling up your paper, the paper might tear. So the smoother and harder, the smaller the fibers of the paper are, the less chance you have that your paper will rip when you pull it up from the plate. So this is the paper I'm using. And I'm using my 5x7" Gelli Arts Gel Printing plate and my Speedball brayer. This is like a soft rubber brayer. You can also use the black one, the harder brayer, but I really like the soft brayer. It's kind of like it sticks to the plate better than the other one, and the other one sometimes like almost feels like it slides over the paint if you have too much paint on it. So that's why I prefer the rubber brayer. And finally, the paints that I'm using. So today I'm using some Liquitex. I'm also using some Amsterdam, and I might also throw in some Winsor and Newton. These are all really nice paints for gel printing. They have a nice consistency, they have nice colors. So these are basically the student grades of professional paints. So they do have a lot of pigments, and you can do gel printing with any acrylic paint, even with craft acrylic paint. But you have to keep in mind that the craft paints have way less pigments. And if you work with thin layers and you roll out the paint a lot, then you might lose some of the brightness of the colors. And also you usually need a bit more of the cheaper paints. So in the end, if you use a student grade professional paint, you have really nice prints for a really good price. And you really don't need the more expensive paints like Golden Open or anything if you are doing just random gel printing like this, for instance, to create a collage material or backgrounds for your art journal or backgrounds for cards. I mean, if you really want to create art, like what you want, something you want to frame, or maybe sell, then you might consider using the more expensive paints. But if it's just for your daily gel printing sessions, then these are really great. So let's just start somewhere. I'm just going to roll out 3 paint colors next to each other, and I will then also create 3 textures in those colors. So let's also take, I think this is a nice one, violet. So you can do this, of course, a couple of ways. What I'm going to do now is roll out the paint, and I'm going to create the texture in the paint, and then I will let the paint dry and use another layer of wet paint to pull up the print. I could also create the backgrounds first, make sheets with plain color without any texture, and then use those sheets to pick up the textures straight away. So I will just show you both ways. And it's mostly a personal preference which way around you do it. And also if you are willing to wait for paint to dry or not. So I'm just going to blend the colors by going up and down a little bit with my brayer, and I roll off my excess paint on some copier paper. And I keep doing that until my copier paper is completely covered with color, and then I put it aside and use it for future projects. Oops. Because you probably can imagine that if you have sheets of paper with all the color on it, that they will be great backgrounds in your art journal or collage material, or you could die cut from it, draw on it, or even use it as the base for a gel print and print on top. So cardboard. Let's start with cardboard. I'm just going to push it in there. And I have to admit that I already know that I have too much paint on my plate. I don't know if you can see it, but if you have too much paint on your plate, and it's very obvious here, your tool will not be able to pull up enough paint, and you will not get like really open areas in the texture, but there will always be a little bit of paint behind in the areas that you actually want to be open. So I should have continued brayering off some of the paint, and maybe I can actually still do that down here to be able to remove more paint with my tool. And I hope you can see the difference. I don't know if you can see it, but the lines in between the paint are like really clean. All of the paint was picked up by the cardboard, where here it left a lot of paint behind. Also, if you have too much paint, you get this kind of funny texture in your paint. It's almost as if you are pulling threads or something. I don't really know how to explain it, but you don't get a nice and even layer of paint. So I always recommend to try and use as little paint as possible, because you really don't need that much paint. Look at how crisp that pattern is down here, because it is such a thin layer. I'm actually, we will have to wait for ages before that dries, so I'm just going to try and go over there and see if I can go back in there. Oops. I'm just going to try and see what happens. It can't get any worse, right? Oh, that looks much better already. There was still quite some wet paint on my cardboard, so it was actually transferred back to the plate. So I like to do it this way and create the texture first, let it dry on the plate, and then use a new layer of paint to pick up the paint, because then I can leave my paper on the plate until everything is really dry, and I will know for sure that I pick up all of the paint from the plate. If I do it the other way around and I use a paper that already has some paint on it and I pick it up like right away, then usually some paint stays behind on the plate and I don't get that perfect image. So I'm just going to try and speed up the drying time a little bit. So how long you have to wait before your paint is dry depends on a lot of things. First of all, it depends on your paint. Some paints dry faster than other paints. Then secondly, of course, it depends on how much paint you use. If you use a lot of paint, then it takes longer to dry. And if you use a little paint, then it dries really quickly. Like down here, it's already almost completely dry. Just to wait just a little bit longer. But also the temperature in your room or humidity in your room might change the drying time. So it doesn't mean that if once you know how long it takes for your paint to dry, that it will always take that long to dry. So you always have to check whether or not your paint is dry before you add the new layer. Because if you add the second layer while this paint is still wet, you will just mix it with a new layer and just totally lose your pattern. Now I can use just plain white, of course, to pick up the paint on my plate. But if you know me, then you know that I love as much color as possible. So I'm actually going to add even more color to this. Let me see. I think I would like some pink, also some white, and maybe let's do a turquoise green. That's actually also a really nice color. Now I'm just hoping that this is dry enough. I will just go for it. Some white. And then again, I will blend the colors. So there will be even more colors because of the blending. Make sure my brayer is not having any wet paint on it anymore. So now I'm just putting this aside because this paper is wet from the paint and it will not get any better adding more layers of paint on it. But when it's dry, I will just take it back again and use it again to clean my brayer until it's pretty enough for me to use for something else. So I'm just going to roll out that paint. Okay, so now I'm going to place my paper on top, and what I just said was I then usually, if I want to be absolutely sure that all of the paint comes off the plate, nothing stays behind, so I have like a perfect print as far as gel prints can ever be perfect, then I should leave my paper on the plate until everything is dry. And with everything, I mean not just the paint that's between the plate and the paper, but also the paper itself. Because as I said before, the moisture in the paint will be absorbed by the paper. And if part of the paint already starts to dry, but part of the paper is still wet, your paper might tear when you lift it up. So you either have to lift it up like right away, which I'm going to do now because I don't want to wait that long. And then you will also see that some paint stayed behind. Or you have to wait a couple of minutes until everything is completely dry. So here's my print. Here you can see that some paint stayed behind down here also on the plate. So that basically means that I had a little bit too much paint there to pick up the print right away. If you have the exact right amount of paint, then everything will come off. But as soon as you have a little bit too much paint and you pick it up right away, some paint might stay behind and you will not get the perfect print. So if I would have left my paper on here for 3 or 4 minutes until everything was completely dry, the gel plate is made to release paint. The paint will stick to the paper. That means that if everything is dry, everything will come off. So if you are having the idea that your print might be a really beautiful print and you want to make sure that you won't lose it, be patient. Wait a couple of minutes before pulling the print. But besides that, I think these are really fun patterns. And they can be used for all kinds of backgrounds or collage material. You could also do this instead of doing this on the card, you can also do it, for instance, on tissue paper. And then the tissue paper is absolutely perfect to use as collage material, because if you glue it down in your art journal or on a painting, it will totally sink into the background and you won't even see that there is any paper added. You will only see the texture. Actually, I can do a print on tissue paper, and I should have some tissue paper here somewhere. Yeah. I have so much stuff on my desk, you won't believe it. You see only this little frame and it looks as if I'm very tidy, but I'm actually having such a mess down here. So I have everything on hand, even tissue paper. So I'm just going to do a print on tissue paper. Yeah, and let's do something that then also has open areas, because that's even better on tissue paper. So how about... yeah, let's do some of these blisters. And also this. Yeah, let's just do this. Yeah, color choices, always difficult sometimes. And some purple. Oh. If you look at how messy my paint tubes are, then you can probably imagine how my desk looks. And one more color. And again, I'm just going to roll it out side by side and blend the colors and then create a texture in it, just to be able to really show you how the textures look. But of course, you can all mix them up and print all the textures on top of each other, or mix up the colors or anything. But I'm just going to stick to this right now to give you an idea. And again, down here is too much paint still, so I'm just going to roll up some more. And then use the blister pack. And I'm just going to push it down, make sure that it touches the plate everywhere. And then hopefully it will pull up enough paint to create these dots. Oh, I moved it. You can see I moved it. The dots are not like complete, but that's fine. No problem. So that's also something that happens easier if you have too much paint, that that the blisters will move, because it then just simply slides into the thicker layer of paint. But in this case, I'm okay with a bit thicker layer of paint, because I want to pull the paint straight away, because I don't want to cover up the open area. So I'm just going to place my tissue paper on top. And this is just the kind of tissue paper that you get like in a shoebox, or if you order something online and it's wrapped in tissue paper, then this is the kind of tissue paper. You can also get tissue paper or silk paper at Michael's, which is even thinner than this. So depending on what you want to use it for, you can order tissue paper to print on. And as you can see, it doesn't tear, even if I would, and that's because the layer of paint is not too thick. If you have a really thick layer of paint, again, it will be absorbed by the tissue paper, and tissue paper is even thinner than the card, so it will easily rip. So again, if you are not sure if some parts maybe have already dried or your paper might rip, you can also leave the tissue paper on your plate until everything is dry. And you might think that you then would rip the tissue paper when you try to pull it off, but that's not the case, because the paint is actually making the tissue paper sturdier and less likely to rip. So it's totally okay to leave it on the plate until everything is dry. But of course, you have to be a little bit careful when you pull up the tissue paper and not kind of rip it off, because it is more fragile than the card. So I'm just going to leave this. I'm going to put this aside for a moment, because the paint is not completely dry. And what I want to show you with the tissue paper, I need it to be dry. So I'm just going to put this aside and create a different texture before moving on to that one. I think I also want to show you this one, because I think that's really cool. If it's done, if it's successful, then it almost looks like bamboo. But the prints are not always successful, because as you can see, when I pull it apart, it's not staying flat. So it is a little bit difficult to get a really nice print, but we're just going to try. And I'm just going to create the bamboo effect. I'm going to use greens.
Birgit, we had a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
What made the oval blank space at the bottom of that tissue paper print?
Oh, here, this here, that's actually, I brayered off too much paint there. So there was simply no paint left. Sometimes you also get that when you have certain types of paint do that when you roll them out on your plate. If you have like a blob of paint like this here and you start rolling, some paints create that little oval shape on the plate. And for some reason, if you keep brayering, it's not going away. And I don't know exactly what that is. I think that might be because of maybe oil in the paint. I'm not sure about that, but I think that might be it. If you have types of paint that do that, then you could roll out your paint on some paper next to your plate, so you have your brayer covered in paint before you add the paint to the plate, so you don't get that oval shape. And maybe it happens with this paint. If it happens, then I will stop and show you. So let me see if I roll this out, if I get that. No, not with this one. Let's see if this one is doing it. I noticed that it often happens with yellows or pink colors, more like translucent colors seem to do it more than opaque colors. And again, I have no idea why. But if you notice that your paint is doing that all the time, then yeah, just roll out your paint next to the plate before, so your brayer has paint all around already and you don't get that little blob of paint there in the middle. So now I have to push this down carefully and hopefully it's not going to move too much. So I get a nice pattern. I'm putting the paper on top because otherwise I might touch the paint with my hands. I think this worked out pretty nice. And maybe you understand what I meant with the bamboo feel. So again, I have to leave this on the plate to dry. If I would have had a sheet of paper with some yellow paint on it, for instance, then I could have put it right on top and pulled the print, but I don't have that here, so I have to wait for this one to dry. But maybe meanwhile, I can show you why this tissue paper with the open areas is so cool. I'm going to take one of my prints. Let me see which one. So why not try this one? It doesn't really matter which one I use. And then I'm going to take matte medium. And the one that I have here is from Liquitex matte medium, which is a fluid matte medium and is and I really like it for collage, but also as a kind of glue. And I also use it if I want to pull a print without changing the color of my background. So if I normally if I add paint on top of this, then the color that you will see in the open areas of your print is the color that I put on here, right? But if, for instance, I want to print, this is dry and I want to print it on here and I want to see these colors in the open areas, then I can't add any color to my plate because that would just cover up my background. So if I use a matte medium, which is basically acrylic paint without the pigments, then I can pull the print without adding any color. So the open areas will be translucent or transparent and you will just see the colors of your background paper. Does that make sense? This is basically, if I would put white on here, on whatever paper I would print it, the open areas would be white because white is my pickup color. This doesn't have any color. So the open areas would actually show the color of the paper that I print on. Maybe that's a better explanation. So, but I also use this to glue down my tissue paper, and then it makes the tissue paper almost completely translucent. So I'm going to use an area that has open spaces, so it will show. And that means that if I glue my tissue paper on top of a colored background, the colors of the background will show in the open areas. And that's why I love tissue paper so much. So I'm just going to add a few drops of matte medium. Is this in the frame? Yes, it is. So I'm just going to add a thin layer of matte medium, and it needs to be thin because otherwise the tissue paper will wrinkle. And then I'm also going to add a thin layer of matte medium on top. And it would have been better if I had done it here in the darker area, because that shows even better the colors that are underneath. And the matte medium really has to sink in and make the paper translucent. So as I said, this is the paper that came from the shoebox, the paper that you can get at Michael's. The tissue paper is even thinner and will also be even more transparent than this one. But I think that you get the idea that if you print on tissue paper, that you can still see the colors of your background if you glue that in, and it will be even better when it's dry. And let me see, not in my drink, but in my paint water. So let me see if this is dry by now. Not completely. So let's help. So I could actually use a hairdryer on cold setting. That might speed up a little bit the drying time. You can never use any heat on your gel plate, so you cannot use a heat gun. You cannot use a hairdryer on the hot setting, but you can, if you want to, use a hairdryer on the cold setting. I don't want to do it here right now because it is a lot of noise and it's not going to be fun for you. But I think this will be dry enough. So I'm looking for a yellow. Here's the yellow. If I can get the lid off, I might need another. I think I had a yellow before, right? Where did I put it? Okay, so how about a green yellow then? Also a nice color. Carefully roll out a thin layer. And I'm going to try and make my layer as thin as possible, because the thinner my layer, the more successful I will be if I'm trying to pick up the print right away, which I want to do because you are not here to sit around and watch paint dry. And just hope it turns out okay. Well, there's still a lot of paint staying behind on the plate. Oh, well, this is what it is. I like it anyway. And yeah, this is definitely showing that I, again, used too much paint. And this is the darker color. So that means the layer of the first layer was a little bit too much. So I could clean my plate now. I could use a baby wipe or a wet cloth, or I could use a paper towel and some baby oil to clean my plate. But I always try to embrace whatever is on my plate. I usually don't clean my plate between printing sessions, only if I want to do specific techniques like image transfers or something and I need a clean plate, or if I want to work with alcohol inks or something, I might clean my plate. But in general, I like those bits that stay behind, and when they get picked up in the next print and they add interest and they give the print a more distressed looks. Usually when I start printing with a clean plate, I don't really like my first couple of prints. I start liking them once there are little bits of paint staying behind on the plate. So let's go to, how about we do the buttons? Or no, I want to do this because I want to show you a trick with this that you can also use with like when you have like thicker stencils, or more like I have these, for instance, that we used to use in school many years ago. And I will show you a trick to push them down without touching the paint in the open area. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to leave the green on there because I think it will create a fun extra texture in there. So again, rolling out my paint. And now I'm placing my my chipboard, which is almost like a stencil, on top. And now if I want to push it down, I have to be really careful not to touch the paint. But I have like an acrylic block here that you can use for stamping. I'm just going to put that on top, and now I can push down my chipboard everywhere without touching the paint in the open areas. So normally if I would put a sheet of paper on top, I would definitely go into the open areas. And if I don't want to put a sheet of paper on top, then I would have to go along all these little edges to make sure everything touches the plate. But if you use an acrylic block, you can just push it down and have it touch the plate everywhere. So I'm going to leave it on a couple of seconds, maybe a minute, because then the chipboard will pull up more paint from the plate, which I obviously want. So let's just lift it up. There we go. And then we have the same problem as we had before, but I don't have any background paper. We don't want to wait, do we? I think we don't want to wait for the paint to dry. So let's just put a piece of paper on top and pull it up without any background color. Because that you can do that, of course. You can also just print on white paper. You don't always need a background paper. But personally, I do like white in my prints, but then I want it to be the white of paint. I don't like the white of the paper. I don't like it if there's areas that where there's no paint. So I would always choose white paint to create white areas instead of using the white of the paper. But you will get the idea. And look at the bits of leftover paint that were picked up from the previous print, which gives it like a really distressed look, and in my opinion, a more interesting look. But that is, of course, very personal. If you really like clean prints, then you can totally clean your plate in between prints, of course. And now it's almost time already, but I really want to use this because I haven't used it yet and I don't know what it will look like. So let's just try and see. Yeah, let's just try and see what happens when I use this. So I really like to just sit here with all my trash, surrounded by all my trash, and just print for the sake of printing without having any outcome in mind, without having any goal in mind. Just create pretty papers. And then people always ask me, but what do you do with all the pretty papers? And I'm like, there are tons of things that you can do with the pretty papers, but sometimes I just make them to make pretty papers. And I don't really need a reason. And I don't always need to use them. But a lot of the papers actually get used for card making. I really like to die cut shapes from gel prints, especially the gel prints actually that are not so successful and didn't turn out so nice that I would use them as they are for a background or an art journal page. Because if you cut out smaller parts, then suddenly colors that didn't look so nice together or patterns that didn't really came out turn out to be really nice once you cut them out. Okay, I'm carefully going to lift it up. It is creating some kind of texture. I'm trying to dab off some paint because the more paint is still on here, the less paint it will pick up from the plate, because it can only hold a certain amount of paint. And I wish I could now use my acrylic block, but because of the thingies here at the side, I can't do that. So I have to make sure that I push it down well everywhere. Might actually turn out quite nice. So while we're waiting for this one to dry, are there any questions that I can answer right now?
We have one from Stephanie who asked if we use the roller, if you ever use the roller to push down paper onto the plate.
Yeah, I have done that, especially when I just started gel printing. That was basically my main thing to do, put down the paper and then go over it with my brayer. But I didn't really like that then the paint from the brayer came on the reverse side of my print, because it depends on what you want to do with your prints, if that is important or not. But also I kind of like to do it with my hands, because then I really feel what I'm doing. For instance, if you are using masks, or you have leaves or anything in between the paper and the plate, because you want to create texture, not when you're picking it up, but more like when you are creating the texture, then personally, I find it nicer if I can really feel where everything is, and that I can really push the paper down in the open areas. And I don't know, rubbing the paper before picking up the print kind of makes me feel better than using the brayer. But that's really personal. So you can definitely do that if you think that it helps you to push down the paper better or get a better, how do you call that, adhesion of the paint to the paper. Yeah, definitely. You can totally do that.
And we did have another question about how you get it so smooth and don't get lines when using the brayer, but it seems like you did kind of just cover that with your response to the previous question.
No, because when you have the paper already on the plate, then the brayer is not going to create any lines in the paint anymore. So that is what happens when you roll out your paint. And I can actually, when I have pulled this print, that is something. Can we go over the time a little bit, or do we have to finish this? Because I could actually show how that happens, the lines in the paint, and how you can avoid it. If we have enough time for that. It will take like 2 minutes more. Can we do that? If that's okay, if people want to see it, then. Okay, I hope now my layer is really thin enough. But as I said, I nowadays I always used to pull my print straight away, but lately I'm preferring to leave the paper on because you just can be 100% sure that all of the paint comes off if you want that, if that's what you want. But yeah, of course, it takes a little bit more time. You have to be a little bit more patient. But I think this turned out pretty okay. That's quite interesting. See, another treasure, and I almost threw it away this morning. Oh, to be a gel printer, and you can never throw anything away anymore. My husband is going crazy. But yeah, that's what it is. So let me show you how to roll out your paint and not get any lines. So first of all, when you start rolling out your paint, you should not do it like this. As you can see, I get this like oval shape here, and that's because the paint is not going all around the brayer if you roll out your paint like this. When you start rolling out your paint, you have to pick it up and put it back down again. And it looks as if I'm also getting that oval shape here, and this is a more translucent color. It might show up in my print, but as you can see, I'm making the layer really thin. So the thicker your layer is, the more likely you will get lines. And then also I'm hardly holding on to my brayer. I'm having it in my hand really loosely, which means that I don't add any pressure to one of the sides. So if you push down your brayer and you push it down on one side more than on the other side, then you will get the lines. So you basically have to make sure that you hardly put any pressure on your brayer. And you will always get in the wet paint, you will always kind of see where the outside of the brayer was, but you will be able to get really a smooth layer of paint. So again, thin layers and not put any pressure on the brayer. Just let it roll, let it do its job without pushing it down. And I hope that I have a really nice and smooth print. Hardly any lines. Okay. We're already over the hour. So I think I really have to quit now. I could go on a bit more, but it is what it is. I will be back next month with a new class. If I'm right, it's the starting with gel printing class, which means it's all the basics you need to know when you start gel printing, including storing and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. So if there's anything that you don't know about that yet, then I hope to see you again next month, and otherwise maybe the month after. I'm wishing you all a beautiful summer, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.